I'm Royal Editor Matt Wilkinson, and today we welcome to the show Vanity Fair's Royal Correspondent Katie Nicholl and Public Relations Consultant Mark Bukowski. This week, the Prince and Princess of Wales have their own Love Island, spending their wedding anniversary on the Isle of Mull. Prince Andrew faces fresh jeopardy after the death of Virginia Giuffre, and should Meghan feature on Who Do You Think You Are after going against the late Queen's wishes by revealing she still calls herself Her Royal Highness?
Meghan Markle has claimed for years that she wants privacy and peace. She said the pressure of royal life was too much. She accused the institution of failing to protect her. But her actions since stepping back say something else.
From one Royal Highness to another. Katie, what do you think that Meghan has breached her 2020 Sandringham agreement that she signed with the Queen?
No, Matt, I don't think she's breached it because she's not using it to push a commercial venture. I mean, if we were seeing it all over websites, product lines, that this was on a personal note to a friend. But I suppose what it shows is that even at that level, and perhaps when you might argue that's when you want to be at your most authentic and perhaps just be known as Meghan to your friend, she's using the HRH title. Now, as part of that Sandringham summit and the subsequent agreement, both Harry and Meghan agreed that when they left the royal family, they would retain those titles, but they wouldn't use the HRH element. And she is, albeit on personalised stationery. I think people would have a real issue with it if she was using it for commercial products. So it's that sort of murky territory. She's in that position where I suppose, what is she meant to call herself? I mean, she openly calls herself the Duchess of Sussex. It's the HRH, which is the most contentious part of it.
But is there a problem here, Katie? This is private correspondence, and she's kind of almost been caught out, because I have a theory on this that maybe she hadn't seen the edit, or she wasn't aware this picture was going to be shown, or maybe her staff didn't realise the gravity, or we'd end up talking about it lots. Is there a danger that it could be, and we don't know, but I'm just guessing, that if she's sending cards to friends, private gifts with HRH, Duchess of Sussex, there are also emails or contacts that we don't see publicly. She could be speaking to Netflix bosses, Spotify bosses, using this title. This is the concern that I think, that's why I feel it's so important.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to know what she's listed or named as on her Netflix contract, because that's clearly a business issue. And I think that's where it would potentially be difficult. I suppose if she's using that HRH title privately, and this has just sort of slipped out when she didn't expect a private note to be made public, it's probably less of a concern for the palace. I think if it was something that was being used more widely in a more commercial context, then I think there might be cause for concern, because, of course, that was part of the agreement, that they wouldn't cash in or capitalise on their titles.
I mean, the Sussexes point out that they retain the titles, they're kind of in abeyance, and this was over a year ago that she used it. Mark, we've heard her recently talk about, when she was on her Netflix show, she said to this Mindy Kaling, "Don't you remember, I'm a Sussex now, I'm not a Markle." Do you think, or why do you think she's using her HRH title, albeit in a private letter, and clinging on to her Sussex name rather than Markle?
Well, it's clearly social capital. I mean, I think that I'm sure her PA, uses it to ensure that she gets that top table at a restaurant. I mean, it will have a huge weight in America to have that kudos of still having that sort of royal aura around her. And it is hypocritical in my I'm sure, I don't know, I'm just, surmising, but I'm sure she uses it a lot, because it is something of value, particularly in the social circle she moves in. And Katie and I were talking beforehand about this sort of constant question about whether or not the sort of image, the brand, if you want, of sort of Harry and Meghan is still perceived in a totally different way than it is in the Commonwealth, and it probably isn't now. I mean, they've overstayed their welcome. But, on one level, you can't have sort of, tweaked all those emotional sort of triggers and then go back privately to continue doing it. It's not a great look in my estimation.
I think it just poses, or just off the back of what Mark's saying, just a bit of a hypocrisy element, a big issue over, well, you've attacked this institution many, many times, most recently in a podcast, which we've just heard this week, and yet you want to retain all of the perks and privileges of being in that institution, which is, of course, the titles. Because I suppose if they are just Harry and Meghan Sussex, because that is her name, she's right to say she's not a Markle anymore. When you marry, most people take their husband's name, and that's what she's done. But she doesn't need to be using the HRH title. She doesn't really need to be using the Duchess of Sussex. But of course, that sets her aside from, everyone else, including top-list, A-list Hollywood celebrities.
Well, I think this is the point. I think you hit the nail on the head here, Mark. If you were receiving emails or receiving contact from a potential client, and if it was, I suppose we do know who Meghan Markle is, we do know who Meghan Sussex is, but once something comes through and it says you're HRH, surely that, and you're selling yourself as that kind of person, surely that has much more weight if you were looking for clients. Really.
Of course it adds weight, and she knows it adds weight, and it gives that sort of subliminal aura that she still has links with the British royal family, which is a very, very, very powerful brand globally, particularly in America. And the fact, if you are disconnected from that, of course you lose your social capital, you lose your weight in terms of sort of some of these deals that she's trying to do. And what you said, and I'm sure she is using that in when it's important, when she has to land something, to remind the people, who the power that she possibly has. This is a power game. And no more than America, where that status is so important, because without that status, she just is another sort of B-lister in a continent absolutely populated with celebrities.
Do either of you think that maybe she's tarnishing the title in any way, using it whether privately or not?
I don't think she's tarnishing the title. I think, if anything, she's sort of, for anybody looking at this and being, let's say, a critical friend, you would say, look, if this was a mistake, telegraph that as a mistake. But to a certain extent, it plays up, as Katie said, the hypocrisy that surrounds it. And what people need now when you're looking at a brand is honesty. People look for that reality of what that brand really is. And there's a sort of quasi-nature. On one hand, you're attacking the institution, you're crying into your pillow. And the next thing, you are forgetting all that emotion you've thrown in, and you're using a title. So yeah, I think it tarnishes it for her, it tarnishes a brand, and it shows how far she is away, and they are away, of being something that is self-determined, which I think which should be important for them. And it shows just how they still have to be linked to the royal family to be relevant.
Katie, is there a danger of slippage? So it's 5 years, over 5 years now, since they sat down at Sandringham, the Queen was there, and it was all agreed, and it was all signed off that they couldn't use their HRH title. Is there a danger now, the passing of Her Majesty late Queen Elizabeth, that the Sussexes could maybe slip and veer into areas where they think it's now safe because nobody is watching?
Yes, I think so. And I think it was sort of course, they had the right to use the Prince and Princess title for their children when Charles became king as Prince and Princess, but they didn't have to use those titles. They've chosen to do that. She's chosen to use the HRH title. When I think back to some of the tours they've done, Nigeria, which, if you didn't know it wasn't an official royal tour, I mean, it kind of looked like one from where we were standing in terms of the coverage it got and everything else. So I think, I think this is a couple that have shown that they will push those parameters as much as they can. And I think at the palace there is a sense that people have to watch, because you sort of give them the loaf and they'll take the entire bakery. And I think there is that sense about them that they will, as Mark says, sort of not have any qualms about knocking the institution, having a crack at the establishment. They want to hold on to everything else it gives them, and I think at the palace they will be wary of that.
I think they'll be watching.
Yes, I do. I think they'll be watching.
That they will be looking at taking any action?
Not over this, because I think it's hard for them to take action over this, because it was private correspondence, and who knows whether Meghan was aware that it was going to be put out into the public domain. But I think they will be watching, because I think if she's using that title in the commercial world in any way, then I think the palace will have a problem with it.
How do you think that? Sorry, Mark.
No, I think the palace will be looking at this and thinking, as long as you're not using it commercially, if you're making a mistake or using this privately, it undermines what they're setting up. Yeah, it's a real sign of weakness. And I think, it's very difficult sitting in the sort of media room or the press office of the palace, because you have good days, bad days, damned if you do, damned if you don't. But you're looking at this and saying this erodes their brand, in my estimation. And I think that constant needs to be identified. They'll say, right, let's keep an eye on it, as Katie said, on the commercial side. But the more you go ahead with this you diminish your impact.
Well, the late Queen was a stickler for the rules. I mean, she removed HRH titles from Princess Diana and Sarah Ferguson, if my memory serves me correct.
Yeah, when they divorced.
I mean, she was a stickler for rules. She understood the meaning behind the honours. But why is it so important, Katie, that we adhere to the actual honour, the naming and the honour system that we have with our royals?
Because, well, very simply, Matt, because those titles are weighted in history and heritage, and they're hugely important. Which is why they're using them. Because
they can't end up becoming a gimmick, really, can they?
No,
they can't be just thrown away or thrown around like this.
No,
they need to be
HRH.
protected. Yeah, they absolutely has to be protected.
Right. And you know Harry quite well. Just finally on this point, do you think he would have any concerns about his wife using the HRH title?
I really don't know. I mean, for whatever Harry's been through and however much he resents the institution, I do think it's still an institution and establishment that he has a respect for, just because that's part of his DNA. And I'm reminded of that clip in the Netflix docuseries when Meghan curtsied, and he looked absolutely appalled at that. I mean, clearly he knows what his wife's stationery looks like, right? Because it's sitting on her desk. And I'm assuming that he, privately, possibly he uses that HRH title as well. But I think both of them just need to be mindful of it. I think, the palace has stood back and tolerated a lot. They've been incredibly patient with this couple, but I think they just have to be careful.
Well, I think this is definitely one to watch. I think this is something to be aware of, and I'll be keeping an eye on it.
The fact it comes back again, he loves his wife.
Oh, yeah.
And we all know that sometimes that can be blind. But can you imagine the story if his private correspondence showed that he was using a HRH title? What would the lens be on that? Be a completely different perspective, because it shows just how much he needs what he's been conditioned. What Katie said in his DNA. That's he's been bred for service, and that again shows just that sort of schism that must be so painful for him.
It's really complicated. As I say, I think it's going to go on and on. This issue, I think, with the HRH.
Keeps on giving. A story that keeps on giving, Matt.
Yeah, I know. Until the decision, maybe one day, if they get removed or they do something so bad that William or the King says you can't have these titles anymore.
Well, he is a blood prince. I mean, that title belongs to him. They can't actually strip him of that.
She signed massive media deals. She appeared in documentaries. She gave interviews watched by millions. This isn't someone trying to escape fame. This is someone repackaging it on her terms. Meghan has carefully rebuilt her public persona. She now appears as an activist, a producer, and a voice for women. She's working the red carpet, networking with political elites, and attaching herself to global movements. At the same time, she continues to use her royal title and branding. While distancing herself from the royal family, she still benefits from the prestige of being the Duchess of Sussex. This shows a clear power play. Keep the title, control the narrative, and reframe herself as the modern royal the monarchy couldn't handle.
But they did sort of agree not to use it, and I think it's been contentious. And as you say, it's something I think that's going to rattle on.
This so this came out in her podcast. I believe it's her first. Believe it or not, it's her first podcast interview she's given ever. Apparently, she's welcome on this show. Yeah, I'm sure she's listening. She's going to come on here for a second one. Did anyone watch? Did you sit through the whole 90 minutes? I dipped in and out of it.
I have to confess, I dipped in and out.
There's something. She opened up a little bit. She said that she's done with trying to prove herself, and she has learnt, here we go, not to be concerned about someone else's urgency or speculation's urgency becoming my urgency. Is this a word salad? Is she talking meaningful in this podcast, or should we move on from this podcast?
I find it very difficult because I didn't watch it, and and I'm the first person to criticise anybody making giving opinion on something when I haven't seen it. I mean, I've read reports, and that's quite dangerous because that is the whole idea of this podcast. I was more interested in perhaps the commercial background to this podcast. This sort of this perfume brand, was it, or this makeup brand, and they flipped. In terms of guests, and you could see that was a very smart commercial deal, and it just shows that I think that won't be the last time we'll hear it, and I think it probably was worth a lot of money to have her associated with this brand.
Okay, interesting. Okay, now we did have some sad news. Virginia Giuffre, her death was announced, and we're still waiting, obviously, for more details. As I say, it is a tragic incident, and we know the last couple of weeks we have been talking about on this show the developments that has been going on in Australia. But this is a royal show, and we have to talk about, of course, Prince Andrew. I spoke to someone quite close to his team a couple of days afterwards to ask, would the Duke of York want to say anything? Would he react in any way? Because obviously Virginia Giuffre had accused him of lots of things, and he has paid her a lot of money. Would he put a statement out or give any kind of guidance? And they said, well, he'd be damned if he does, and he'd be damned if he doesn't. What do you think the right thing for Prince Andrew to do?
Stay quiet.
Yeah,
I mean,
would agree.
That is exactly right. Whatever he said, it would sort of draw the story back out again. And I don't think people are really that interested in hearing anything from him, to be brutally frank. And actually, what I'm more mindful of is the whole Giuffre family now having to deal with the plethora of outrageous conspiracy theories that percolate every day. That's a sad thing when they're dealing with, obviously, issues. And the death of a woman who's had an incredibly troubled life in the full glare of the media globally. Augmented by the connections to Prince Andrew. So I think there's great sadness there around that. And when you see conspiracy theories, most ridiculous conspiracy theories, that people will buy into as fact, not as a conspiracy theory.
Which is why I think it would just be futile for Andrew. I mean, the palace don't comment on him now anyway. They've completely detached themselves, which I think is very wise, is a very clever PR move on their part. But, if he gets involved on any level, it will fuel conspiracy theories, it will continue this narrative. I mean, I thought Richard Kay did a brilliant piece, actually, in the Mail, which was just the sort of idea being that in her death, in her suicide, and of course there's so many conspiracy theories about her death anyway, it sort of inexorably connects these two. It just makes that narrative even more tragic. I mean, that's all we're ever going to remember Prince Andrew for. So I think he just, the King has wanted him to slip quietly into the background for some time. I was quite surprised to see him at the Easter service. I know it's a family occasion, but really the greatest thing that Andrew can do for the royal family is to just disappear. And of course, he won't do that. As long as he continues to appear, that sort of spectre now, I suppose, of Virginia Giuffre is going to loom very large over him. He just simply can't escape it.
There is no closure to that story.
That's what I mean. There's no closure.
None whatsoever.
There's no closure now.
And even, that continual shot of Ghislaine Maxwell and him in that flat with his arm around her, it will
haunt him forever.
It is there. And, and I think that's the problem. He is the toxic spare. I mean, he had sort of pitch at the palace, and certain businesses will say that his influence is very profound, particularly in startups. So, he could help raise that sort of seed money for lots of people. All that's gone. There's been some attention on that this week. But what do you do when you are bred, to serve, and the toxicity of you, he may as well be some sort of monastic monk going to some Trappist, monastery and staying put, because he can't do anything. As Katie said, the mere glimpse of him is a story.
Well, where do we go forward? Where does Andrew go forward then, really? We were discussing this last week about what happens to Andrew after his appearance at Easter, and there was some good debate, and lots of people were leaving comments online. Many people were actually supportive of Andrew that watched the show were saying, he needs to be given a chance, some, forgiveness over Easter, or forgiveness is a way forward. But I want to get your thoughts, Mark, because when he made the payment to Virginia in 2022, I believe, a statement was put out on his behalf. And the statement said that he would endeavour to help or work a way forward for victims of trafficking. That hasn't happened. I mean, could that be a way forward maybe for Andrew? Some kind of charity work, show some kind of contrition. Doesn't have to admit anything. He can continue to maintain his innocence. But is there a way forward maybe in a charity sphere, even behind the scenes?
It needs to be a very brave charity. I mean, just trying to be fair to him at the moment, that statement, I'm sure that intention was valid. That's what he wanted to do. But if you're sitting on a charitable board, you're looking at the work of, let's say, an established charity in that field, having Andrew on it, is that a particularly good look?
Well, you called him toxic.
Yeah, so therefore, I don't think it brings the right aura, to what you're trying to achieve. I think in time, it's quite interesting that, gradually things sort of fade away in people's mind. There isn't the same sort of intensity of emotion around an idea. And I think that he possibly could, in the background, maybe he is, give some advice, help people, use whatever influence he has. And he has a powerful network outside this country, particularly in the Middle East. So I think there are stuff he could do, but perhaps that he can't go public on it. And I think that's what people expect in some way, that there's got to be this fulsome idea of what you're doing next. So I think it is tough for his brand, but I think that there is an opportunity, and maybe that's what's going on at the moment. We don't know.
I disagree, actually. I think if there was an opportunity, it was after that Newsnight interview. That was when things needed to change for Andrew. That was when he should have shown some contrition. He could have, his daughter's involved with anti-sex trafficking charities. I think best leave it to Eugenie and Beatrice doing the great work that they do. I just think that Andrew is, as you say, so toxic. I don't think there is any hope of a rehabilitation for him. This is the man who would turn business trips into pleasure trips and play golf anyway and loves to horse ride. I mean, can't he just go and do that on a remote part of an estate and leave the king, who was doing, in my opinion, a brilliant job? He's, the family's been under so much pressure the last few years. The last thing they need is this sort of incumbence on it, making it even harder than it needs to be. Attracting all sorts of difficult and, frankly, negative headlines. A time when, I think the royal family could do without it.
He is toxic. There's no worry about it. And that, that interview was
a disaster.
The full stop. I mean, I think I described at the time it was like the equivalent of driving a clown car with a lit cigarette through a firework factory. It was just jaw-droppingly sort of deaf in terms of, and blind in some ways to things around you.
And yet we're 6 years on and it still hasn't recovered for Andrew. No. It's still, more
because he keeps trying to edge his way back in.
He won't let go.
That's
in the same way
problem.
that Harry and Meghan won't let go of those HRH titles. He just is clinging on. He needs to let go.
And as soon as you edge back in, it's a story. It's a story. And particularly in a world where, we're it's clickbait news around Andrew. I mean, with thousands of titles.
Well, I mean, I'm sure all our thoughts and prayers go to Virginia Giuffre's family in Australia.
It's very, very sad.
It's a very sad.
Incredibly for her family, sad. A terrible time to be going through.
But nothing from Andrew, and we think it's the right decision.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Now, I'm quite tired today. I want to bore you with it, but I have a very long journey to the Isle of Mull. It was like 11 hours to get there from London. It's a remote Scottish island. It's the size of Greater London, but I think it only has about 3,000 people in it. It's absolutely stunning. Because I joined the Prince and Princess of Wales on their wedding anniversary, their 14th wedding anniversary. It wasn't weird. I wasn't in a room next to them with a cup by the wall or anything like that. But
they were in a very remote lodge, very deliberately.
They were in a very remote lodge.
As far away from the media as they could get.
It was really, really nice. And I just want to spend a little bit of time discussing some happiness. Because is it just nice to see two people clearly in love, clearly happy, having a whale of a time in a beautiful setting of the Isle of Mull?
Yeah, it's lovely. And I mean, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but I can't remember a time when they've done something public on their wedding anniversary in the past. I mean, they usually choose to celebrate it, understandably, privately. And then when they realise that, this trip fell over their wedding anniversary, apparently they said to their aides, we're happy to go ahead with it. And obviously, getting away together, going to Scotland, which is very significant to them because, of course, it's where they met at St Andrews. It's a place they love. I mean, I'm told that they've been up to Scotland quite a few times while Kate's been, in her period of remission. It's somewhere that's very special to both of them. And they look, well, you were with them, but everything we saw in terms of the footage and the images, they looked so happy together. And it was an important trip for Catherine. It was her first away trip since her cancer diagnosis. Hopefully we're going to see, more of her travelling around the country and possibly even further afield. She looked wonderful, she looked healthy, she looked happy. They looked very, very in love. And I think, when you look at them together, it's a really important image that for the royal family at a time when it's been through a huge amount of flux and turbulence, and we've got a king who's living with cancer. These two are they're the bright hope for the House of Windsor. They're the promise of the future.
For me, it was the happiness. It was the kind of joy, the kind of excitement that they bring to the royal family and bring to engagements that some of the other royals... I mean, you look at some of the footage of Harry and Meghan, for instance, when they're abroad in Colombia or when they're in Canada or just recently in New York, seem a bit glum, seem a bit down. This couple just bring it every time, bring their A game. We're talking about the way they looked. Princess of Wales I think she had a lighter... a hair highlight, do I call it?
Yeah, she looked like she'd had a few highlights put in her hair, and I liked the fact that they were twinning in tweed and they're very deliberately sort of dressed down, hiking boots on, out in the forest, meeting communities and children benefiting from those communities. It just felt very very authentic and doing the sorts of things that they love to do.
And that's exactly what I would say. We talked about the lack of authenticity, the artifice that surrounds Meghan and Harry. Here we have what I feel about it. They feel like they're in control. They feel that there is a balance between what they have to do and how they want to sort of ensure that their life, particularly for their family, is as real and as possible. So it felt honest if you're talking. It felt honest if you're talking about it, and I think that's what sort of comes out from this, and this is where people really connect with something now, particularly under the glare of modern media, that we can actually immediately feel there is something real about something. Where you look at this, you think, well, What's a game? What's the game the others are playing?
Meghan speaks often about compassion, empathy, and healing. Yet she has publicly criticized her in-laws in books, interviews, and documentaries. She accuses others of leaking to the press, while somehow her version of events ends up in the headlines first. She asks for understanding, but offers little to those she criticizes. These contradictions are now too frequent to ignore. They paint a picture of someone who plays both victim and power player, depending on what suits the moment. Meghan is not just repositioning herself, she's challenging the institution that once defined her. She wants to be seen as bigger than the monarchy. She wants to influence global culture, media, and politics.
You immediately talk about the authenticity, and I remember just before the weekend, William was in Elephant and Castle in South London, and he went to a community centre. Have you seen the footage where William's walking down a pathway, and it's a long walk for the photographers to get the picture of William attending this event, long way down a path, and the security guards, there's a couple of barriers, and an incredible woman comes across. I don't know if you've seen the footage. She comes across like shouting, calling out to William, gives him a big hug, said, it's the Prince, it's the Prince. And it's those little moments where you go, this isn't staged, this isn't PR, this is actually them kind of being their authentic selves.
Yeah. And very relatable as well. And, and I think you see that in the King as well. I wonder if it sort of coincides with, and I think it does, with the death of the late Queen. And with that, I think, we're always going to have this moment of transition with the monarchy. But I think in so many ways, it feels more modern. It feels more relatable. And, you're right. You look at William and Kate and they look really happy. I mean, you and I have done enough of these royal tours. We know they're hard work. I'm sure you're knackered because the schedule is full on, right? But I've been away with you to the other side of the world with them, and they make these tours almost look like a second honeymoon. They look happy to be away. They're happy to be engaging with members of the public. And this is the first we've seen of them as a couple in, over a year now. And I think there's something very reassuring about that. They are a great partnership. They're a brilliant team. They're clearly very happy, and you know what? They're doing really good work. They've condensed and focused their their work, their charitable initiatives, and you sort of feel like this is a couple on a mission. They're on a mission to do some really good, important work, and they're doing it.
So I'm kind of newer to this game than yourself. So what I'm witnessing, almost like an antidote to the kind of negativity that we see elsewhere. You think this has always been the case, where we talk about second honeymoons? It's just what I'm witnessing now, but you're saying this is for years it's been on.
No, absolutely. I mean, I've done many tours with the two of them, and they love going out, they love meeting people, they love the idea of sort of representing the monarchy, whether it's overseas or, just up in Scotland. And, Catherine has said that she was keen to get back to work. After her cancer diagnosis, we know that she's sort of doing this gradual return to work. I think we see a lot more of her than we expected to, and we're going to see more of her over the coming days and weeks with the E-Day and trooping and all the big things that are coming up. And I think that's because you can see how happy it makes her. This is what she enjoys doing, and William enjoys doing too. So, yeah, I think they have a very unique knack of making it look easy when it's not, and just giving the nation a bit of a lift. It's lovely to see them up in Mull. The sun was shining. You were in a beautiful place. The pictures are gorgeous. They're doing what they love, and I think sometimes we just need those sorts of happy news stories.
It's PR gold, wasn't it? It's PR gold. Catherine and William in Scotland, looking amazing, looking happy on their wedding anniversary.
And of course, the weather helps at the moment. But I think they've got the balance, as I said previously. They've got a real sense of purpose. And of course, with the passing of the Queen, there's more determination in terms of how they want to play it, where obviously she had a profound influence about what the shape and look of the royal family should be. And I think that, let's say the truth, Meghan and Harry, give that yang to the yin to a certain extent, that while they're playing with all this sort of this media and spin and, and hypocrisy, here is honesty. So everybody then thinks that's what we want it to be. And I think the nation wants them to be happy, particularly after some of the health challenges and whatever. They see two people trying to find their life, be determined, and I think they support that. And I think more power to them. And you're right, it's good news. And, in a troubled world now, that's where it shines through. And I think they understand their role in delivering good news as well. Certainly the press office will be.
Yeah. Now, talking of authenticity and making an impact, King Charles hosted a reception at Buckingham Palace. This was a reception for people who are living with cancer, people who are working in cancer charities and also health professionals, and some big names as well, including the family of Sun colonist Deborah James, who sadly died a couple of years ago, and there was a big bowel cancer campaigner. The King did deliver some words. They were written. They were very strong.
Yeah,
I think.
They were very powerful.
As far as the King would go, they were kind of personal, poignant words. But he's an authentic person in this kind of area. He's a great spokesman or a great face for raising the profile of living with cancer, but also the care that patients get.
Yeah, I mean, he's been, both he and the Queen are patrons of numerous cancer charities, including Macmillan, who were there at the reception last night. But I think, it was very important that after we learned of the King's cancer diagnosis and when he was able to go back to work in remarkably short time, actually, and you consider he's 76. He is remarkable. That the first engagement he did was to go and visit a cancer centre. I mean, that was a really powerful moment to convene these charities and these leading researchers into cancer care at Buckingham Palace last night was clearly a very deliberate move. As you say, it was a handwritten message in a booklet, I think, that went to everyone that was invited last night. And to hear him write about what a daunting and fearful experience being diagnosed with cancer is, will resonate with a lot of people. I mean, he pointed out 1,000 people a day in the UK are diagnosed with cancer, and he's connecting with these people.
Well, if you don't mind, you as someone who has been open about their own cancer diagnosis, how important were the King's words to you, or the fact that he seems to have your back? He seems to understand what people are going through.
I think that he does speak to the cancer community, which isn't just those of us who've gone through a diagnosis. It's the family, it's the friends, it affects all of us, really. And so I think to have our head of state sort of so personally aligned with something that touches so many of us is really important. I think he's sort of smashing stigmas in terms of talking about it. We've never heard the royals be so open about their own personal health, and and I think that extends very much as well to the Princess of Wales. She has spoken to anyone suffering to reassure them you're not alone, and I think that's a very hopeful message to send out. Cancer isn't always the death sentence that it once was. People are surviving cancer more. They are living with cancer. It's being diagnosed earlier. And I think the fact that it's affected two of the most loved and senior members of the royal family within the space of a year has had a very profound impact on people. I mean,
not just the King and Princess of Wales, but also Sarah Ferguson.
Yes, of course. Sorry, I should have mentioned her as well. Matt,
Sarah
you're
Ferguson
right.
was there. Sarah Ferguson was invited to the event at Buckingham Palace. And I'm just wondering, after everything that had happened with Prince Andrew in the last couple of weeks, is this a show of support for Sarah Ferguson?
Listen, the King has a really good relationship with Sarah. I think she's very well liked. She's been invited to family occasions and up to Balmoral, and she has been a very loyal supporter of Andrew, but more than just that, of the royal family. And I think the King is incredibly magnanimous in many ways, and that's just an example of one of those ways in making sure that she is included, because, as you say, she's gone through her own personal experience of it.
Mark, how powerful do you think it is to have someone such high profile as the King speaking out, showing support for cancer survivors, people going through cancer, and the charities?
I mean, it's incredibly important to be able to openly talk about this, and you look back and you think perhaps in the Queen's time, there wouldn't be this openness about health issues. And I think that it's beautifully framed in the sense that there's never too much. Somehow they've got the sort of ability to talk about this and not go too far. But by saying so much, which to a certain extent, there was a lot of speculation around. Let's not forget that with Catherine, they did get it wrong. They did let things hang, and obviously there were sort of private issues connected with that. We can understand that. But again, when we talked earlier about conspiracy theories, some of the most ridiculous things are being written about at the sort of time. And I think they found a way of expressing it and then finding the same sort of language to go out and support people who as Katie said, it's an important thing for the cancer community to have that level of person to bring hope. And we're talking about positivity in, perhaps for many people, it affects families in a very negative time.
I just wonder if this could become an annual thing for the King. I was just wondering that last night, I wasn't there, but that seeing how it landed, how the impact of it could be something, because he's never really, you say he does, they've got patronages, and he's kind of kept cancer as kind of one of the issues that he gets involved in, but I just wonder if like an annual event like this at Buckingham Palace could be the way.
I think it's very possible, and I think because he's had this personal experience, it does connect him to the community in this way. And I think he'll be very aware of the impact that he's having. Going and visiting that cancer centre was so powerful. When the Princess went back to go and visit the Royal Marsden, where we later learned she'd been treated, I mean, I don't want to dismiss it as PR gold, because that almost makes it sound crude and belittles it. But for those cancer charities who need that awareness, who need that public stage, I mean, it's incredible, isn't it?
And fundraising.
Absolutely.
Let's think about it. There's still a lot of work needs to be done with certain and anything that can raise money for for the research group, more power to it. And I think that's the high wattage that is brought to that.
OK, let's end on a lighter note with our quick-fire questions, guys, OK? So deep breath and have a little think about these. Right, Markle or Sussex? What alias should Meghan go with on her own moving forward?
Listen, I think, we think about Madonna, we think about Gaga. Come on. Why is she bothering with HRH when she could just go hell for leather and become Markle? I mean, what a powerful brand that might be. And it gets rid of all the negativity and just go forward and hang out with the rest of the celebrities who actually own that one brand.
Meghan Sussex. It's enough.
Meghan Sussex, not Meghan Markle.
No, she's not Meghan Markle. She got married. She chose to take his name, Meghan Sussex.
Okay, good. So, as we discussed earlier, Catherine debuted her new hair this week. But which royal has the best hair?
Not William.
You're asking me. I think
We get to the heart of the big questions here on this show.
Oh, the Duchess of Sussex. Kate.
Yeah.
Kate's got amazing. She's got amazing hair, and you know she looks incredible. I mean, she's got quite a mane on her, hasn't she?
Yeah. The problem for the male members of the royal family is not great news. They're Barnetts, is it really?
No.
It's it's not a full mane there, is it?
Okay. Where should the Prince and Princess spend their 15th wedding anniversary?
Gosh, that's a question. Should they be sort of maybe going to something a little more glamorous? Maybe, maybe back to the Caribbean, hang out at Mystique, follow their aunts.
I'm all up for that if they again invite the reporters along to cover the engagements.
I'm sure expenses might take.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
I think I thought Scotland was lovely, actually, and it has played such a big part, hasn't it, in their relationship, that lovely bubble of St Andrews. It might be nice to just get back to Scotland each year. And they love it there.
I like the 70s, 80s themes of Mystique, personally, because all that sort of old 70s glamour. And of course, by the time they get to 50, I mean, we'll be looking back at that as a sort of like a golden age of celebrity.
Okay, and finally, as I discussed earlier, a fan scrambled across the grass to meet William for a selfie last week. Which royal are you most keen to have a photo with? I'm assuming you have had photos with.
Yeah, I have. But who would I most like to be photographed with? I think the King. I actually think he's doing a great job at the moment. I've got a huge amount of respect for him. I think we all do.
Yeah,
I agree.
Okay.
He's the A-list.
Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. Well, thanks very much, guys. We've been through a lot, and it's been brilliant. So I really appreciate everything you guys have had to say.
Thank
you so much.
But this comes at a cost. The more strategic and polished her moves become, the more people question what's real and what's performance. And if her words continue to clash with her actions, even her most loyal supporters may begin to look twice. Meghan knows exactly what she's doing. She's not lost. She's not naive. She's playing a long-term influence game with media, titles, and emotion as her tools. But power without consistency raises questions, and public sympathy only lasts as long as authenticity holds up. She says she wants to move on, but everything she's doing shows she's still playing the game and playing to win.